Bonjour. Today we're looking at a performance mixer with a performance and generative superpower, the Eowave Supamix. Supamix is a 10 HP stereo mixer with a superpower that I haven't seen elsewhere, and which is a very interesting proposition if you are into generative music or live performance. Now, the normal part of this mixer is that it is a 6-input mixer with the following breakdown. You have 2 mono channels, each with a pan control. You have 2 more mono channels, but with a CV-controlled pan control. And you have 2 final stereo channels with no pan control. So instead of having one type of input, you have 3 different styles to suit different types of material you might feed it. And finally, it has a mute control per channel. If you have sight, these mute buttons actually light up to show you whether they are on or off, and they are clickless. There is some technology behind here to declick them. And actually, there is one more thing, which is that the input levels will give you a bit of transistor drive close to maximum, and then obviously fully at maximum. That, however, is the end of normal when it comes to the Supamix, because here's the superpower. So the Supamix has clearly got some kind of clever computer control inside it, because its superpower is that we can adjust the muting of channels. There are 12 sort of like magic ways of muting channels on and off, and you can use a control voltage to change that, or just push this little button to kind of activate it. What this lets you do is automate muting in really interesting and creative bonkers ways, stuff I just could not have conceived. Like there's a 6-bit binary sequence pattern, as well as like rotations and things I maybe could have conceived in order to change how channels are muted on and off. And that could be useful if you have whole sounds coming in through here and you want to mute them on and off creatively to create like generative patches that play out by themselves. But also you might like to use Supamix as a kind of earlier construction set in a sound. So you might potentially feed it lots of different waveforms and then mute them on and off in interesting ways, and then filter them and affect them after Supamix. And so we'll do a bit of both in this video. All right. So I've set up an example where we've basically got a sequence going into 5 oscillators, and all 5 oscillators are going into the Supamix. Plus the 6th channel, I've got some pink noise. And then I'm feeding the output of Supamix into a magnetosphere, Mark II. That's another Eowave module, a very kind of gnarly, warm filter. And I'm doing this so that I can CV control the on and off of the waveforms as a kind of complex sequential switch. And so what I can do is mute and unmute manually. So I've got a bunch of different waveforms. But of course, the whole thing of Supamix is there are these 6 modes, and each mode has got an A and a B, yin and yang version of that type of effect. The types of effects are inversions, ons and offs, binary counters, rotation, a sort of step sequencer or CV sequencer, and then random. And the way that you choose them is you hold this little swap button here, and you push the button once for one mode and again for the second type of mode, and it will wink at you if you're in the B version. So let's go to the top one. This is 1A, trigger inversions. So everything's off, but if I push this button, it's just going to turn everything on. And then if I come through and choose, I like these 3. If I push this, it's going to invert them. So now we get the inversion. see. And then perhaps if I was to go to swap and then hit number 6, we're getting random channels being turned on and off. And then what you can do is you can send it some on and off gates. And when it receives a gate, it's the same thing as if I pushed the little button. So suddenly we can do this like crazy like animated thing. So let's choose the binary counter. I do this by holding swap and pushing the 3rd button. And it's sort of counting and filling up the channels in an interesting way. It kind of gets bigger and bigger. The sound kind of fills up in a weird way. It's so vibey, this filter, it's adding all this drive. And then if I adjust the levels, of course it's going to adjust this balance. Quite important when we're smashing all 6 waveforms together. What I'm going to do now is copy the gate. So the gate that triggers the voice also triggers the selection. So there's a unification of the onset of the sound and the changing of the tone mix. Yeah. Yeah. Let's try 4B, that's rotate. Now, 4B is one that requires CV control. So what we might like to do is create a looping CV, which I'll do with the Vulcan. Goes from the out to the in. Nuts, isn't it? Very cool. And that's in mono. What happens if we do stereo? Okay, here's a stereo version where I've got the voices panned left and right, hard left and right, and they're both going into different channels of the Tempête Magnétique, which is a quad filter, which I'm only using half of. And then I've got it in swap mode. So I can push the button and flip between 2 states. And in this bottom 3, I've got kind of deeper and noisier oscillators, and in the top, I've got higher oscillators. So you can do kind of call and response sorts of things. And I could use a clock divider and like trigger that every like 4 bars or something, or pans. And then I've obviously used like LFOs and things to control it. Yeah, very kind of weird and interesting rhythms. mode is momentary. It's really interesting. I don't have anything else that can do that. Now I should use these LFOs to pan my Hannibal voices, which I'll enable. We should hear them start to pan. And the hallmark of something that I think is interesting in modular is something that would be really hard to make with individual modules, which this very much would be. Ooh. Oh, that's dramatic. Now what I want to try is control that by hand. See if I connect a DC offset to it. From maths, it shows how sending voltage in fills it up and then returns it with 0 volts to an initial state. So I can have channels on, and then as I turn up the voltage, it will add to them. Super controllable. When you return to the same voltage, it returns to the exact same spot. Really cool. Really cool. That is legit. Wicked. Okay, my sweet. I've set up a stereo thing with Supamix at the end of the chain. And there's a whole host of things feeding into the Supamix, from drums with effects baked into them in the chain. That's the Dnipro Radiant. And then I've got a bunch of weird monophonic little synths. All clocked at different rates. Some from the play fader. I've got some more drums. Ugh. The RWK Algo, which is going in stereo, for it is a stereo instrument. And I've got a bunch of other weird little monophonic sort of voices. And I can mute things on and off. Clickless, as we said. And of course, I have this ability to do big shifts by using the various modes in this thing. This is mode 1A, which is the inversion mode. So whatever is not muted is what becomes unmuted. They swap places when I push the button, which works well for this. Straight to drums there. Bit of a drummy breakdown. And I can introduce elements. And then the inversion of that has no drums and that element missing. And I can just manually bring things in. And I've got LFOs that are swirling, the mono channels that have CV control. So it's very interesting. You can do these big shifts, swapping instantly from one set of channels to the other. Here the clickless mutes. That is the Supamix from Eowave. Never played with anything quite like this, and it is ace. Links below, and thanks for watching.